In a quiet little village surrounded by tall trees and wide green fields, there lived a young girl named Amina. She was small, with gentle brown eyes and short curly hair that glowed in the sun. Amina had once been very happy. She used to live with her parents, who loved her deeply. Her father was a farmer who worked hard in the fields, and her mother made colorful mats to sell in the market. Their home was small, but it was always full of laughter and the smell of warm food. But life changed suddenly when Amina's parents fell sick during a heavy rainy season. The rain lasted many days, and the river near their home rose high. One cold night, her father's cough grew worse, and by morning both her parents were gone. The neighbors buried them under a big tree near the river, and from that day, Amina became an orphan. Her uncle, Musa, took her in. He was her father's brother, a man who worked with goats and chickens. His wife, Halima, was not a kind woman. She often complained that Amina ate too much or did not work hard enough. Amina tried her best to please her aunt, but nothing ever seemed enough. She swept the yard, washed the clothes, fetched water from the stream, and helped with the goats, yet Halima always found something to scold her about. The village where they lived was small but lively. Every morning, people walked to the market carrying baskets on their heads. The air smelled of roasted maize and sweet fruit. Children laughed and chased each other through the narrow paths. But when Amina passed by, the laughter often stopped. People whispered softly, their eyes following her. "Do you see that girl?" someone would say. "That is the one with bad luck." It had started when strange things began to happen around her. One day, the village chief's goat went missing. Another day, a clay pot broke into pieces just after Amina touched it. And sometimes, on sunny days, dark clouds gathered suddenly when she walked by, and rain fell only over the path she took. At first, people thought it was just coincidence, but soon, stories began to grow. They said that the spirit of the river had cursed Amina. They said her bad luck followed anyone who helped her. Amina did not understand why such things happened. She never meant for anything bad to occur. When the goat went missing, she had only been nearby fetching water. When the pot broke, she had only tried to carry it to help her aunt. Still, people stared at her like she was something strange. At school, things were not much better. The teacher, Mr. Cato, tried to be fair, but even he looked uneasy sometimes. The other children avoided sitting next to her. One boy, Sephu, once shouted, "Don't touch me or my pencil will break." The class laughed, and Amina's face burned with shame. After that day, she stopped talking much. She would sit at the edge of the classroom, quietly drawing shapes in her notebook. During playtime, when the other children played skipping games, Amina would walk alone to the big mango tree near the fence. She liked to watch the birds there. The birds never feared her. They sang freely, and their wings shimmered in the sunlight. Sometimes she whispered to them, "If I were a bird, no one would call me unlucky." Her uncle, Musa, was kinder than his wife, but he was afraid of what people said. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, he sighed deeply. "Amina," he said, "you must try not to cause trouble. People talk, and I cannot stop them. Just keep to yourself." Amina nodded, though her heart felt heavy. She did not know how to stop bad things from happening. She wished she could tell him that she didn't cause them on purpose, that she didn't even understand why they happened at all. One morning, Amina woke early to fetch water. The air was cool, and the sky glowed pink with dawn. She balanced the water pot on her head and walked along the narrow path to the stream. As she reached the bank, she saw her reflection in the water. The girl in the reflection looked tired and lonely. "Why me?" she whispered softly. "Why am I always the one they blame?" She filled her pot carefully, but when she turned to leave, her foot slipped on a wet stone. The pot fell and shattered into many pieces. The sound echoed through the still morning. Birds flew up from the trees, startled. Amina's heart sank. By the time she returned home with empty hands, her aunt was waiting outside with an angry face. "What did you do now?" Halima shouted. "Do you enjoy wasting things? That pot was new." "I slipped," Amina said quietly. "It was an accident." Halima folded her arms. "Accidents follow you everywhere. Amina, you are full of bad luck." Amina lowered her eyes and went to sit behind the house. Her hands trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks, falling into the dust. She watched the small drops soak into the ground and wished they could take her sadness away. Later that day, she went to the river again, even though she wasn't supposed to. She sat near the tree where her parents were buried. The river was calm now, shining under the afternoon sun. She closed her eyes and whispered to the water, "Mama, Baba, if you can hear me, please help me. I don't want people to hate me anymore." A soft breeze brushed against her face, and she thought she heard a faint voice in the rustling leaves. It sounded like her mother's gentle tone, saying, "Be strong, my child." Amina opened her eyes, but no one was there. Only the river flowed quietly, and the birds sang as if nothing had happened. For the first time in a long while, she felt a tiny spark of peace. That night, as the crickets sang, Amina lay on her mat, staring at the roof. The moonlight came through the cracks and painted silver lines across the floor. She remembered her mother's smile, her father's laughter, and her home before everything changed. She missed them deeply, but she also remembered the voice by the river. "Be strong." Amina promised herself that no matter what people said, she would keep trying. She would keep being kind, even if the world did not understand her. Maybe one day, things would change. Maybe one day, people would see her for who she truly was, a girl with a brave heart, not a cursed one. In the distance, a dog barked, and the wind whispered through the trees. Amina smiled faintly in the darkness. The night felt long, but somewhere deep inside her, a quiet hope began to grow. It was the beginning of something she could not yet name, a feeling that perhaps bad luck was not her destiny after all. Maybe, just maybe, her story was only beginning. The end. Amina sat by the river again, her small hands tossing stones into the calm water. Each stone made a soft splash, sending little ripples across the surface before disappearing. She watched them fade, feeling like her hopes did the same, gone before they even had a chance to stay. The river was her only friend now. It listened to her without judgment. It didn't whisper about curses or bad luck. It only flowed, calm and gentle, carrying her secrets away. The village was full of life that she no longer felt part of. Children laughed as they chased each other between the huts, their feet kicking up little clouds of dust. Women talked loudly as they cooked by the fires, and the men came home from the fields carrying bundles of maize. But wherever Amina went, conversations stopped. Eyes turned away. People pretended not to see her, as though her shadow carried misfortune. Once, she had a best friend named Tund. He was cheerful and brave, always climbing trees or racing through the paths with a wide grin. They had been close since they were little. Together they had shared roasted maize, played by the stream, and made small toys from banana leaves. But that was before everything changed. It began with Tund's family's crops. One season, the rain stopped too early, and the fields dried up. The maize wilted, and the yams turned soft in the soil. People said it was because Amina had passed through the fields one afternoon. They said her shadow had brought dryness. At first, Tund defended her. He told his parents that Amina was kind and would never bring harm. But when their crops didn't grow the next week, his mother forbade him from seeing her again. After that, Tund stopped coming to play. When Amina waved, he looked away. Once, she ran after him, calling his name. "Tund! Please wait!" she cried, her voice breaking. But he didn't turn around. That night, she cried quietly on her mat, her face hidden from her aunt and uncle. She wished she could make everyone believe she wasn't cursed. She wished she could go back to when life was simple and happy. Days passed, and Amina grew quieter. She worked harder, hoping it would make her aunt like her more, but it never did. If the fire burned too hot, Halima blamed Amina. If the goat went missing, she said it was Amina's bad luck again. Even Uncle Musa began to sigh whenever he saw her sitting alone. "You must be careful, Amina," he said once. "People fear what they don't understand. Just stay quiet." So Amina stayed quiet. She fetched water early before others woke. She went to school but didn't talk to anyone. She ate her food quickly and alone. Her world became small, just her chores, her thoughts, and the river. One afternoon, while she sat by the water, she saw a group of children nearby. They were laughing and splashing each other. Among them was Tund. Amina's heart lifted for a moment, and she smiled shyly, thinking maybe he would look at her. But when he did, His face changed. He whispered something to the others, and they all began to chant softly, "Bad luck girl, bad luck girl." Amina's smile disappeared. She stood up and walked away quickly, her eyes burning. Behind her, the children's laughter echoed like a song she no longer belonged to. When she reached home, she went behind the house and sat on the ground. She hugged her knees, resting her chin on them, and whispered, "I didn't do anything wrong." The words felt empty in the air, as if even the wind didn't believe her. That evening, the sky grew dark faster than usual. Clouds gathered, thick and heavy. People began to run to bring in their laundry and tie down their roofs. Halima shouted at Amina to close the chicken coop. As she ran to do it, lightning flashed across the sky, and thunder rumbled like a giant waking from sleep. Rain poured down suddenly, strong and wild. The water washed through the yard, pulling away leaves and mud. In the morning, the damage was clear. The small garden behind the house was ruined, and the chickens had escaped. Halima's anger filled the air. "It's your fault again," she shouted at Amina. "You brought the storm. You're cursed." Amina's throat tightened. "I didn't bring it," she said softly. "It was just rain." But no one listened. Halima waved her hand and walked away, muttering about how bad luck had entered her home. Uncle Musa said nothing. He just sat by the doorway, tired and unsure of what to say. Amina went to the river again that day. The water was muddy and fast, carrying branches and leaves. She sat on a rock, hugging her legs. She wanted to disappear into the sound of the rushing water. For a moment, she thought about walking into the river, just to see if the water would take her far away from the village, to a place where no one knew her name. But then she remembered her mother's soft voice from long ago, saying, "Amina, no matter how hard things get, never stop hoping." Those words were the only thing that made her stay. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I won't stop hoping, Mama. I promise." The next day, she decided to visit the market even though she had no money. She liked watching the people, the colors, and the noise. The market was always busy, women selling fruit, men trading goats, children laughing. She felt almost invisible there, and that was a strange kind of peace. As she walked through the stalls, she saw an old woman sitting under a tree, selling beads and charms. The woman looked at her kindly and said, "Child, you look sad. Why do you carry such a heavy heart?" Amina didn't answer. She looked down at her bare feet. The woman reached out and touched her arm gently. "Don't let what people say decide who you are," she said. "Sometimes, light hides inside the ones everyone fears." Amina looked up, surprised by the woman's words. She wanted to ask her name, but when she blinked, the woman was already turning to another customer. Amina wasn't sure if she had imagined it, but the words stayed with her all day. When she returned home, she helped her aunt quietly and did her chores without complaint. At night, she sat outside, watching the stars. They sparkled above the tall trees, and she wondered if her parents could see her from there. She began to think about the old woman's words. Maybe she wasn't cursed. Maybe she was just different. Maybe one day people would understand. The next morning, she saw Tund again. He was carrying a basket of cassava to his mother. For a moment, he glanced at her, and their eyes met. She expected him to turn away, but instead, he gave her a small nod. It wasn't a smile, but it was something, a tiny crack in the wall between them. Amina's heart felt lighter. She walked to the river later that day, as she always did, but this time, she didn't cry. She picked up a stone, rubbed it between her fingers, and threw it far into the water. "I am not bad luck," she said softly. "I am just Amina." The river sparkled under the sunlight, and the breeze brushed against her face like a gentle hand. For the first time in a long while, she smiled, just a small smile, but real. Somewhere deep inside her, hope began to grow again, slow but strong. The villagers still whispered, and Halima still frowned, but Amina began to hear another voice too, the one inside her that said she was more than what people thought. She was not their fear, not their stories. She was Amina, the girl who still believed that one day, things would change. And as the river flowed softly beside her, it felt as if it agreed. The sun was sinking behind the hills, painting the sky with soft colors of orange and pink. Amina sat by the riverbank, her feet dangling just above the water. The day had been long and heavy. Once again, her aunt had shouted at her for no reason, and the other children had laughed when her basket tore at the market. She had tried to stay strong, but her heart felt tired. As the sun dipped lower, tears rolled down her cheeks. She hugged her knees and whispered to herself, "Why can't things ever be different? Why does everyone think I'm cursed?" The river glistened in front of her, calm and endless. It seemed to listen, as it always did. But this time, something else happened. A soft sound came from behind, a cane tapping the ground slowly. Amina turned and saw an old woman walking toward her. The woman's back was bent, and her white hair glowed like silver in the evening light. Her clothes were old but clean, and her eyes sparkled kindly. She carried a small woven basket and leaned on a long stick as she approached. "Child," the woman said gently, "why are you sitting here alone, crying into the wind?" Amina quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm not crying," she said softly, though her voice trembled. The woman smiled a little. "Your eyes say otherwise. Tell me, what troubles your heart?" Amina hesitated. She had never seen this woman before. Still, there was something calm and warm about her, something that made her feel safe. So, she told her everything, how people blamed her for bad luck, how her aunt scolded her, how her friends had left her. The words spilled out like water, and when she finished, she looked down, embarrassed. The old woman nodded slowly. "Ah," she said, "so they call you unlucky." Amina nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. "They do. And I don't know why. I don't do anything wrong, but bad things keep happening." The woman looked at the river for a moment. "You know, child," she said, "people fear what they don't understand. When they cannot explain something, they blame what is easiest." Amina frowned. "But how do I make them stop blaming me?" The woman smiled, and from her basket, she pulled out a small wooden pendant. It was round, with a tiny sun carved in the center. She held it out to Amina. "Take this," she said softly. "It is not magic, but it carries a reminder. What shapes your life is not luck, it is your heart. If you fill your heart with kindness, even the darkest shadow will fade away." Amina took the pendant carefully. It was smooth and warm in her hand. "Will it really help me?" she asked. "It will," the woman said, "if you believe it will. But remember, it is not the pendant that brings change, it is you." Amina wanted to thank her, but when she looked up again, the woman was already walking away slowly, her cane tapping softly on the ground. She turned once, smiled, and said, "Be brave, my child. The world changes for those who keep kindness in their hearts." Then she disappeared down the path. That night, Amina could not stop thinking about the old woman. She held the pendant close as she lay on her mat. It seemed to shine faintly in the moonlight. For the first time in many days, she fell asleep with a small smile. The next morning, Amina decided to do something different. She woke before sunrise and went to help her aunt without being told. She fetched water, cleaned the yard, and even fed the chickens. When Halima came outside, surprised to see the chores already done, she only frowned slightly and said, "About time you learned to work early." But Amina didn't mind. She felt light, as if the pendant around her neck gave her quiet strength. Later that day, she walked to the market. As she passed by, people stared as usual, but she kept her head high. She saw an old man struggling to carry a basket of vegetables, so she hurried to help him. "Let me carry that for you," she said kindly. The man looked unsure at first, but then nodded. When they reached his stall, he thanked her with a smile. "You have a good heart, child," he said. Amina smiled back. Those words warmed her more than the sun ever could. Over the next few days, she continued to help others quietly. When the neighbor's goat fell ill, she brought it water and stayed with it until it recovered. When a child dropped her bowl at the well, Amina helped clean it up instead of walking away. Slowly, her small acts of kindness began to spread through the village. Some people still whispered behind her back, but others started to see her differently. "Maybe she's not cursed after all," one woman said. "She's just a kind girl." Amina didn't care about what they said anymore. She felt stronger now. Every time she looked at the pendant, she remembered Mama Zuri's words, "It is not luck that shapes you, but your heart." One afternoon, she found a group of children trying to fix a broken basket. They had been scolded by their mother and didn't know what to do. Amina walked over and said, "I can mend it." The children stepped back nervously. "Are you sure it won't break more?" one of them asked. She smiled. "I'll be careful." She sat down and began weaving the loose ends together. Her fingers moved quickly and gently, and soon the basket looked strong again. The children's eyes widened. "Wow," one boy said. "It's better than before." Amina laughed softly. "See? Not everything I touch breaks." The children giggled, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged again. As the days passed, even her aunt began to notice the change. One evening, Halima watched as Amina brought food to a sick neighbor without being asked. When she returned, Halima didn't scold her. Instead, she said quietly, "You've grown into a good girl, Amina." Amina looked up, surprised. "Thank you, Auntie." That night, she sat under the stars with her uncle, who smiled proudly at her. "You've been helping everyone lately," he said. "The village is beginning to see the real you." Amina touched the pendant on her neck and smiled. "I just want to be kind. That's all." Her uncle nodded. "And that's what makes you special." The river became her favorite place again, but now she didn't sit there to cry. She sat there to think, to dream. Sometimes she wondered if Mama Zuri would ever come back. She wanted to thank her, to show her how much had changed. But even if the old woman never returned, Amina felt her presence in her heart. One morning, as she was fetching water, she saw something shiny by the riverbank. It was a small wooden carving, another sun, just like the one on her pendant. She picked it up and smiled. Maybe Mama Zuri had left it there as a sign, or maybe it was just the river's gift. Either way, Amina felt peace. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." From that day on, people in the village began to greet her kindly. Children waved when she passed, and women called her to help with their work. The curse that once followed her name slowly faded away, replaced by something brighter. Amina had learned something powerful, that her life was not controlled by what others said or by strange accidents. Her heart, filled with kindness and courage, could shape her own story. As the sun set over the hills, she walked home, her pendant warm against her chest. The wind blew softly through the trees, carrying the sound of the river in the distance. Amina smiled and whispered, "It was never bad luck. It was just me learning how to be strong." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The end. The night was quiet at first. The moon hung high above the village, and the air was cool and still. Amina sat outside her home, watching the stars. She loved peaceful nights like this. The sound of crickets filled the air, and the smell of cooking fires drifted softly through the wind. But soon, the air began to change. The calm breeze grew stronger, turning rough and cold. The tall trees near the river began to sway and creak. Dogs barked in the distance, and chickens rustled in their coops. Amina felt a chill run through her body. She looked up and saw dark clouds moving quickly across the sky, covering the moon. The air grew heavy, and a loud rumble of thunder echoed through the hills. "Another storm," she whispered. But this one felt different, angrier, stronger. She ran inside to tell her uncle. "Uncle Musa," she said, breathing fast, "the wind is rising. I think a storm is coming." Her uncle looked outside and frowned. "You're right," he said. "We must tie down the roof before it gets worse." Her Aunt Halima began to gather the chickens and cover the cooking pots. The wind howled now, shaking the walls of their small house. Dust and leaves flew everywhere. Lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the entire village for a moment before the darkness returned. Soon, screams and shouts filled the air. The wind tore off parts of roofs and knocked down fences. People ran, trying to hold onto their homes and children. "The storm! The storm is too strong!" someone shouted. The sound of thunder grew louder and louder, and the sky roared as if angry with the world. Amina's heart pounded. She could hear children crying and goats bleating in fear. She looked at her uncle. "We have to help them," she shouted. Her aunt grabbed her arm. "No, Amina. Stay inside. It's too dangerous." But Amina pulled away. "I can't. People need help." Before her aunt could stop her, she ran out into the storm. The wind almost knocked her down, and sand stung her eyes. She covered her face with her arm and pushed forward. Around her, the world was chaos. Roofs flew through the air like paper, trees bent low, and water from the river spilled into the paths. Amina saw a small boy clinging to a broken fence, crying. She recognized him. It was Quito, one of the neighbor's sons. "Hold on!" she shouted. She ran to him, grabbed his hand, and pulled him toward a nearby hut. The wind pushed hard, but she held on tight. They reached the hut, and she helped him crawl inside. "Stay here," she said. "Don't come out until it's safe." Then she turned back into the storm. She saw another family struggling to keep their roof from flying away. The father held a rope, but it slipped from his hands. Amina ran to him. "Here, take this," she said, grabbing the end of the rope. Together, they pulled it tight and tied it to a wooden post. The man looked at her in surprise. "Amina, you shouldn't be out here." "I can help," she said, her voice strong against the howling wind. "We can't let the roof go." With her help, they tied down the roof just before another gust of wind hit. The man nodded in thanks, shouting, "You're brave, girl. Be careful." Amina moved from house to house, helping whoever she could. Her clothes were soaked, and her hair whipped across her face. She saw a group of small children huddled near a fallen tree, their mother calling their names desperately. Amina ran toward them, lifting one child after another and guiding them to safety. The mother cried and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Amina. Thank you." But Amina didn't stop. She looked around and saw that the storm was growing worse. The wind howled so loudly that it drowned out everything else. The river was rising fast, its waves crashing against the banks. If it overflowed, it could flood the village. Her uncle came running toward her, shouting through the storm. "Amina, come back inside. It's too dangerous." But Amina shook her head. "Uncle, the river. It's almost over the bank." He looked toward the water and saw she was right. "We must block it somehow," he said. They ran together, gathering large stones and branches to build a barrier. Others soon joined them. Amina shouted directions, helping people move in a line. "Pass the stones this way. Quickly," she said. Even though she was just a young girl, her voice was steady and full of courage. People listened to her. They trusted her. The villagers worked side by side in the rain, their faces wet and tired. With Amina leading them, they managed to build a small wall along the edge of the riverbank. The water still rose high, but it began to slow down. The current grew weaker. The worst of the storm was beginning to pass. When the wind finally started to calm, everyone stood still. The sky was still dark, but the thunder had faded into the distance. The villagers looked around at the damage: fallen roofs, broken fences, and flooded paths. But no one had been seriously hurt. The goats and children were safe. The river had not swallowed the village. Amina stood in the middle of it all, covered in mud and water. Her hands were scraped, and her clothes were torn, but she was smiling faintly. She looked up at the sky as the first bit of moonlight broke through the clouds. Her uncle walked over, breathing heavily. "You were brave, Amina," he said. "You saved many lives tonight." Halima came behind him, her face full of worry and tears. She hugged Amina tightly. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered. "You went out into the storm. I was wrong about you, my child." Amina smiled softly. "I just did what I had to do," she said. "I couldn't stay inside while everyone was afraid." By morning, the storm was gone. The village was quiet again, but now it was filled with something new: hope. People gathered around Amina, thanking her for her bravery. "She ran into the storm," one man said. "She saved my son," another woman added. Even those who once whispered that she was cursed now looked at her with respect. The village chief came forward, an old man with kind eyes. "Amina," he said, "for many years, people have feared you. They said you brought bad luck. But tonight, you have shown us your true heart. You are not cursed. You are a blessing." Amina felt tears fill her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I only wanted to help." The chief nodded. "And that is what true courage is. Not strength, not luck, but the heart to do what is right, even when it's hard." That evening, when the sun returned, The villagers worked together to fix the damage. Amina helped again, carrying wood and repairing walls. Everyone greeted her kindly. Children who once ran from her now followed her around, smiling and asking her to tell them stories about the storm. She laughed with them, her laughter ringing through the air like music. Later, as the sky turned golden, Amina walked back to the river. The water was calm again, gently flowing as if nothing had happened. She took the small wooden pendant from her neck and held it in her hands. "Mama Zuri was right," she whispered. "It's not luck that shapes me. It's my heart." She closed her eyes and thanked the river for listening to her all those lonely days. Then she looked back at the village, where lights from small fires glowed warmly. For the first time in her life, she felt proud. People no longer looked at her with fear. They saw her as brave, as strong, as someone who had faced the storm and saved them. The curse that once surrounded her name had been washed away by the rain. Morning came slowly after the storm. The village lay quiet under a sky washed clean by rain. The air smelled fresh and sweet, and the ground sparkled with drops of water that caught the sunlight. Birds began to sing again from the trees, and smoke rose gently from the first morning fires. Everywhere, people stepped outside their homes to see what was left. Roofs had been torn, fences broken, and trees bent low, but the village still stood. Amina walked through the muddy paths, her feet sinking softly with each step. She looked around and saw faces peeking out from the huts, tired but alive. Children ran to gather chickens that had escaped, and men began to pick up pieces of fallen wood. Her heart filled with relief. They had survived. The river had not swallowed the village, and no one had been lost. When she passed by, people called her name. "Amina," they said with smiles. "You saved us." Some waved, others came to thank her with hugs or handshakes. The same people who once looked away from her now met her eyes with warmth. It felt strange but beautiful. She could hardly believe it. Her uncle Musa stood near their hut, his clothes still damp from the night before. He smiled proudly as she approached. "You did well, my child," he said. "The whole village owes you thanks." Her Aunt Halima came out behind him, holding a bowl of warm porridge. "You must eat," she said softly. "You worked harder than anyone last night." Amina smiled and took the bowl. "Thank you, Auntie." Halima touched her shoulder gently. "I was wrong about you," she said. "I used to think bad luck followed you, but I see now that it was strength. You were brave when we were afraid." Amina's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. As the day grew brighter, villagers gathered in the center of the village to talk about rebuilding. Some were sad, others tired, but there was a feeling of unity that hadn't been there before. The storm had shaken their homes, but it had also brought them together. Amina stood quietly among them, listening as they made plans. Then she looked down at the muddy ground and had an idea. She turned to her uncle. "Uncle Musa," she said, "may I plant something here? Something to remind us of this day." He looked at her curiously. "What will you plant?" "A tree," she said. "A tree of hope." Musa smiled and nodded. "That would be good." Amina went to the riverbank and found a young tree sprouting near the edge, small but strong. She dug it up carefully and carried it back in her hands. When she reached the center of the village, people gathered around her to see what she was doing. She knelt down in the middle of the open space, her hands digging into the soft earth. The villagers watched quietly. With gentle movements, she placed the small tree into the ground and covered its roots with mud. Then she pressed her palms together and whispered, "This tree will grow with hope. It will remind us that storms can break our homes, but not our hearts." For a moment, no one spoke. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in, and soon the whole village cheered. Children laughed and danced around the tiny tree, and the elders smiled proudly. The chief stepped forward and raised his hand. "Amina," he said in his deep voice, "you have taught us something greater than we ever knew. You showed us courage when fear ruled us. You showed us kindness when we turned away. From today, no one will call you unlucky again. You are Amina, the girl with the brave heart." Amina felt warmth rise in her chest. The villagers' cheers filled her ears, but inside she felt quiet peace. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a curse, not as a shadow, but as herself. The next few days were full of work. Everyone helped rebuild what the storm had taken. Amina worked beside them, lifting wood, tying roofs, and carrying water. The people worked with laughter and song, and Amina's presence brought them energy. Whenever someone grew tired, she encouraged them, saying, "We survived the storm together. We can rebuild together too." One afternoon, while repairing the fence near her uncle's house, Amina heard the laughter of children. She turned and saw Tund walking toward her with a wide smile. He looked shy but happy. "Amina," he said, scratching his head, "I came to say sorry. I shouldn't have listened to the others before. You're not unlucky. You're the bravest person I know." Amina smiled. "Thank you, Tund. I forgave you a long time ago." He grinned, relief shining in his eyes. "Can we be friends again?" She laughed softly. "We never stopped being friends." They spent the rest of the afternoon helping the younger children gather firewood. The sky turned golden, and a cool breeze brushed over the village. It carried the smell of rain and earth, clean and new. That evening, when the work was done, the villagers gathered around the small tree Amina had planted. Someone had placed small stones around it to protect it, and already its leaves looked greener. The people brought drums and began to sing. The rhythm of their voices filled the air, joyful and strong. Amina clapped along, her heart dancing with theirs. Mama Zuri appeared quietly among them, her silver hair shining in the firelight. Amina's eyes widened. She ran to her and hugged her. "You came back," she said happily. The old woman smiled. "I heard about what you did, my child. I knew you would find your strength." "It was your words," Amina said. "You told me my heart would shape my life. You were right." Mama Zuri nodded slowly. "I only reminded you of what you already carried inside. You see now, don't you? The curse was never real. It was fear that people followed. But courage and kindness are stronger than fear." Amina looked at the tree and smiled. "Yes, I see now." The two of them stood side by side, watching the villagers dance. The firelight glowed on their faces, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than before. As the night went on, the music grew louder. People sang about the storm, about bravery, and about hope. They sang Amina's name with joy, turning her story into a song that children would remember. Before going home, Amina walked once more to the river. The moon reflected softly on the water, calm and clear. She took out the wooden pendant from her neck and looked at it. It had become smooth from all the days she had worn it. She smiled and whispered, "Thank you, Mama Zuri. Thank you, river. Thank you, hope." Then she placed the pendant on a rock near the water, letting it stay there as a gift to the place that had always listened to her. When she turned back toward the village, she saw lights glowing warmly through the night. Laughter floated in the air, soft and full of life. Days turned into weeks, and the small tree grew taller. Every morning, Amina watered it before starting her chores. The villagers began to call it the Tree of Hope. They said it brought peace to the village, and whenever someone felt sad or afraid, they sat under its shade to remember that storms always pass. Amina grew stronger too. She helped her uncle start a new garden near the river, and the crops grew healthy and green. People often came to ask her for advice, and she always greeted them with a smile. She no longer walked alone. She was surrounded by friends, laughter, and love. Sometimes, when the wind blew gently through the leaves of the Tree of Hope, Amina thought she could hear her parents' voices in the rustling sound. She liked to believe they were proud of her, watching from the stars above. One evening, she sat under the tree as the sun set behind the hills. The sky turned gold, then red, then purple. The village glowed in the soft light. Amina looked at the people around her, children playing, women laughing, men working, and her heart felt full. She whispered to herself, "I used to think I was cursed, but now I know I was only waiting to find my strength." The wind brushed her cheek like a gentle touch, and the leaves of the young tree whispered back as if agreeing with her. Amina smiled, her eyes shining. She had faced the storm, and from it, she had built something beautiful. From that day on, Amina was no longer the unlucky girl. She was the girl who brought courage and peace to her home.